How dare you show up in those filthy clothes and ruin my son's special day?" The furious shout echoed through the quiet private room of the restaurant. A well-dressed older man pointed a trembling finger at a woman in a blue work uniform. A single tear rolled down his son's fiancée's cheek. But no one in that room knew the truth yet. They didn't know that by judging a person by their clothes, they had just made the biggest mistake of their lives, and they were about to find out who was truly in a different league. It all began a few months earlier. The Four Seasons restaurant, a landmark of quiet luxury on Wall Street, beyond the gates, a meticulously kept garden whispered of old money and tradition. This was the day two families were meant to become one. It was the engagement dinner. The main characters were Liam Morgan, or a promising young surgeon at Johns Hopkins Hospital, and his fiancée, Mia Davis, a nurse at the same hospital. They had met at work, supported each other, and promised to build a life together. For Liam's parents, William and Elizabeth Morgan, this day was a ceremony, a ritual to elevate the Morgan family's status even higher. This dinner was a critical step. William was the chairman of Morgan Construction, a company with $250 million in annual revenue. He wore a custom-tailored Italian suit. A Patek Philippe watch gleamed dully on his wrist. His wife, Elizabeth, wore a custom gown. A brooch of pearls and diamonds on her dress spoke of their immense wealth. At 6 p.m., Liam and Mia were the first to arrive. Mia wore a simple white dress with a small pearl necklace. Her face was tense with nerves as she greeted her future in-laws. Elizabeth smiled at her politeness. "You're even more beautiful than in the pictures. I can see why Liam is so taken with you," Elizabeth said, taking Mia's hand gently. Up to that moment, everything was perfect. The only problem was, Mia's mother hadn't arrived, and the time for the reservation had already passed. "I'm so sorry. My mother seems to be running a little late." Mia clutched her smartphone, her voice trembling as she apologized again and again. The smiles slowly faded from the Morgans' faces. Late for a first meeting? Does she have no sense of common decency? Elizabeth's cold whisper cut through the quiet room. Just then, Mia's phone rang. "Mia, I'm so sorry. Truly." It was her mother's voice. "Something unexpected came up. I'm on my way now. Can you just wait another 15 minutes? William glanced at his watch, his lips twisting in an obvious scowl. "She's already 30 minutes late. This is beyond rude." At that exact moment, there was a sudden commotion at the entrance of the restaurant, and the door to their private room slid open with a sharp sound. Standing there was a woman who was completely out of place. She was wearing a faded work uniform. A name tag on her chest read, "Davis Building Services." On her feet were worn-out sneakers. She was clutching a pair of yellow rubber gloves in her hand. Her hair was a mess, and there was a smudge of dust on her face. The faint smell of floor cleaner clung to her. The woman walked straight toward Mia. She looked her daughter in the eye. "I'm so sorry. Mia, I'm late. We had an emergency water leak at one of the buildings." William and Elizabeth Morgan stared, as if they were seeing a ghost. The blood drained from their faces. It couldn't be this person. Elizabeth forced a tight, strained smile. Her eyes darted around the room. "Are you her mother?" "Yes, I'm Mia's mother, Barbara Davis." Barbara nodded respectfully. "Thank you so much for inviting me this evening." But no one returned her polite greeting with a smile. William crossed his arms, looking Barbara up and down as if she were an object for sale. Elizabeth wore an expression of undisguised contempt. Then, in a quiet but ice-cold voice, she spoke. "Perhaps you'd like to freshen up in the powder room?" Elizabeth's words were a polite insult, like being slapped with a silk glove. The air in the room turned to ice. Barbara froze for just a second, then gave a small, quiet nod. "Yes, you're right. I apologize. I'll be right back." When the door closed, a heavy silence fell over the room once more. No one spoke. Only the dry clinking of silverware echoed awkwardly in the tense atmosphere. Soon, Barbara returned. The dust was gone from her face, and her hair was neat, but her clothes were the same. She was still a building maintenance worker, a mother who worked with pride. She took her seat. "Again, I sincerely apologize for my tardiness today, and thank you for this wonderful invitation." Her voice was clear and sincere, without a hint of shame, but William and Elizabeth refused to meet her eyes. "Well, we don't have much time, so let's begin," Elizabeth said, deliberately excluding Barbara from the conversation. She was treated as if she didn't exist. The rest of the conversation was directed only at Liam and Mia. Whenever Barbara tried to speak, William would cut her off with a loud, theatrical cough. When the food was served, not even a simple "I hope you enjoy your meal" was offered to her. Through it all, Barbara just kept a gentle smile on her face. She sat quietly next to her daughter. During lulls in the conversation, she would look at Mia with pride and say, "Thank you for always taking such good care of my daughter." Liam could only manage a guilty, pained smile in return. Only Mia stared down at her lap. The fists clenched on her knees were white and trembling. Her mother's pain felt like a knife in her own heart. The meal proceeded like a tasteless ritual. A Michelin star-tasting menu prepared by a world-class chef. But no one was enjoying the taste. William barely touched his food, speaking only to Liam and Mia. "Mia, you must have a lot of night shifts. Taking care of your health is important. I hear nursing is becoming more and more specialized. It must be very demanding work." His words were polite, but a clear line had been drawn between them. In the middle of it all, Elizabeth suddenly spoke up. "Mia, why don't you quit your job as a nurse?" "Excuse me?" "Of course, it has its challenges, but I find it very rewarding." "But once you're married to Liam, you won't need to work anymore. You'll be a doctor's wife." Mia answered quietly. "No, please let me continue. That job, it's my pride." "Oh, is that so?" I suppose that's how young people think these days." Elizabeth smiled as she took a sip of her tea. Behind her calm expression, a rigid, old-fashioned set of values lay hidden like thorns. Mia fell silent. Barbara said nothing. The temperature in the room dropped below freezing. It was then, "Excuse me, are you the Morgan party?" A calm male voice came from beyond the door. The next moment, a waiter opened it, and a man appeared. He wore a perfectly tailored suit. His leather shoes were polished to a mirror shine, tall and slender. His posture was flawless. He looked to be in his mid-30s. Intelligence and confidence radiated from his handsome face. The man gave a respectful nod. "I am terribly sorry for my late arrival. I am Mia Davis's cousin, Ethan Miller." The Morgans looked at him with suspicion. "I'm a corporate lawyer. My firm is Miller and Associates, on Wall Street." There was no one in the legal world who didn't know that name. The expressions on William and Elizabeth's faces changed dramatically. Their backs straightened. The look of contempt vanished from their lips. "Oh, well, that's A very respectable profession. Ethan responded calmly and took a seat next to Barbara. Aunt Barbara, thank you for the invitation tonight, and thank you for working so late for Mia's sake. Ethan, I told you that you didn't need to come. I had to. I wanted to tell them myself, in your presence. Ethan said, then turned to face the Morgans. The only reason I was able to go to college was because of this woman. She supported me financially the entire time. His words were quiet, but they carried immense weight. Nah, she is the most honest, hard-working person I know. She is a woman I respect with all my heart. At his words, Elizabeth sat up even straighter. William lowered his gaze slightly, but the change didn't last long. A few minutes later, Elizabeth gently set down her fork. Her eyes were fixed on Mia. Mia, dear, forgive me for being so blunt, but your mother, does she always dress for work? Yes, she's a building maintenance manager. How admirable. Yes, truly, but Elizabeth paused. We were hoping for Liam to marry someone from a more similar background. Her words were polite, but the thorn was sharp, and it pierced Mia's heart. She was saying, you live in a different world. I understand that all work has dignity, in theory. But there is still the matter of status. Ethan started to say something, but Barbara stopped him with a small shake of her head. It's all right, Mia. Her mother whispered, so only her daughter could hear. I'm used to it by now. Her voice was like a calm lake, filled with resignation. William looked at his son with a stern face. Liam, come with me for a moment. The two of them left the table. The meal ended like a tasteless ritual. The day after the dinner, Mia's world began to quietly fall apart. At the hospital, she focused on her patients as usual. She smiled and made conversation. But during her lunch break, she would run to a bathroom stall, and the tears would flow uncontrollably. The memory of that night, when her mother was treated as if she didn't exist, played over and over in her mind. No matter how polite her mother was, she wasn't seen as a person because of her job. The bitterness of it formed a lump in her throat. Then, she got a call. It was from Liam's mother, Elizabeth. Mia, could I have a moment of your time? There's something I need to discuss with you. They met at a quiet cafe in Beverly Hills, a sterile space, decorated in white. A single flower in a vase on the table. Elizabeth was already seated. I'll be direct, Elizabeth said, before taking a sip of her tea. This engagement between you and Liam, I'd like you to call it off. Mia was speechless. She gripped the cooling cup with both hands. Is this about my mother? Yes, Elizabeth answered flatly, without looking away. Your mother's profession and her values. To be honest, they are simply too different from ours. My mother raised me on her own. She's been working since before 5 every morning. Yes, that's very noble. But marriage is about the joining of two families. Nobility isn't enough to make it work. Elizabeth's words were like ice. Liam understands all of this. That's why I need you to understand what I'm about to say. Just then, the smartphone on the table vibrated. Mia's breath caught in her throat when she saw the name on the screen. Liam Morgan. Mia, I'm so sorry. Truly. His voice on the other end of the line was weak and trembling. But I understand what my parents are saying. I can't go against them. I think we should break up. She stared at her phone with a trembling hand. She couldn't process what was happening. The person she trusted more than anyone. The person who said he would always be on her side. The person who smiled and said he wanted to build a future with her. That person had just let go of her hand. Mia stood up without a word. She walked out of the cafe. The stylish streets of Beverly Hills looked like a foreign country. When she got back to her apartment, her mother Barbara was in the kitchen, wearing an apron and preparing dinner. "Oh, welcome home. You're early today. I found some wonderful chicken for soup." The moment she saw her mother's back, the thread she had been holding onto snapped. "Mom? What's wrong? You look pale." Her mother's hand, holding a knife, stopped. "The engagement, it's off." "Why?" "Because our families are too different." "They're ashamed of my job." Mia's words came out in broken pieces. They said they'd be embarrassed if I showed up to the wedding in my work uniform." A sob caught in her throat, choking her words. "I'm so sorry." "Mom, it's all my fault." Barbara said nothing. She just pulled her daughter's trembling body into a tight hug. "No, it's not." Her voice was quiet. "It's not your fault. You have nothing to be ashamed of." Barbara's voice was trembling slightly too, but beneath it was a core of steel. "No matter what anyone says, I am proud of this job. It's the job that raised you." And then she added, "If that man would abandon you because of me, then that's all he was ever worth. He wasn't strong enough to protect you." Only Mia's quiet sobs echoed in the still room. She buried her face in her mother's chest, crying silently. It wasn't my mother's fault. She knew how hard her mother had worked, raising her all alone, how desperately she had fought for everything they had. Just then, the front door opened with a sudden, violent noise. "Mia! Aunt Barbara!" Ethan Miller, dressed in a suit, burst into the room, out of breath. He must have rushed over from his office. "What in the world happened?" Seeing Mia's tear-streaked face, Ethan understood everything. "Because we're from different worlds." Mia managed to choke out the words. "He said he wants to call off the engagement because of my mother's job." The calm expression vanished from Ethan's face. A deep line formed between his eyebrows, and his clenched fists turned white. "Those people! How could they do this to you and Aunt Barbara?" Ethan stood up. "Let's end this. There's no reason to endure this humiliation. We should tell them the truth right now." But Barbara just shook her head quietly. "Not yet, Ethan. It's not the right time. People show their true colors at the very end. We have to see it through. We've put up with it this long. Just a little longer." Ethan's voice was filled with an anger he couldn't contain. "Aunt Barbara, you're too kind. How can you stay silent after being insulted by people like that?" "What do you think they'd do if they knew who you really are? They'd have a heart attack." Cutting him off, Barbara looked intently at Mia's face. "Mia, actually, there's something I've been hiding from you for a long time. Something really important." Mia wiped her tears and looked back at her mother. Something you've been hiding?" Barbara paused for a moment, as if searching for the right words. Then, she spoke slowly. "You see, I don't just do building maintenance work. I have another job, a very big job." What do you mean?" Ethan interjected gravely. "Aunt Barbara, are you really going to tell her now?" Barbara nodded silently. "Yes, but not right away. Let's wait a little longer, until I've seen their true nature with my own eyes." "Mom, what are you talking about? What other job? Why was it a secret?" Barbara squeezed her daughter's hand tightly. Her hand was warm. You'll understand soon. So for now, don't ask any more questions, and just trust me. I will never, ever let you be unhappy." Ethan took out his smartphone and made a call. His voice was cold and clinical, a stark contrast to his earlier passion. "Yes, it's Miller. I need you to move forward with that matter immediately. It's time to put the plan into full effect. The situation is critical." Mia's anxiety grew as she listened to the tense exchange. "Ethan, what plan? Who are you talking to?" After hanging up, Ethan gave a cold smile. "You'll see soon enough, Mia. We're going to make that arrogant family understand, to the very marrow of their bones, just how foolish their choice was." Barbara spoke quietly, but with a clear tone of authority. "Don't be hasty, Ethan. Let things unfold naturally. Revenge, you know, is a dish best served cold. It's much more effective that way." Ethan nodded deeply. "I understand, but I can't stand to see Aunt Barbara insulted any further." Her mother and cousin's conversation swirled in her head. She couldn't understand any of it. What is happening? What are they hiding? Barbara smiled gently at her confused daughter. "Mia, just wait a little longer. I'll take care of everything. They'll soon find out just how big of a mistake they've made." That night, Ethan and Barbara sat in the living room, talking with serious expressions. Mia lay in bed in the next room, listening to their hushed voices. She couldn't make out the fragments of their conversation clearly, but the tense atmosphere between them told her that a plan, a serious plan, had just been set in motion. The next morning, Ethan Miller was dressed in an expensive suit she had never seen before. It looked like a knight's armor, ready for battle. Just before he left, he spoke to Barbara. "Aunt Barbara, the curtain rises today. Please be ready." Barbara nodded quietly, but firmly. "I am, but we must not rush. We will guide them, so they realize their own mistakes." Mia still didn't know what was about to happen, but the determined look on her mother's and cousin's faces made her feel that her own destiny was about to change dramatically. A few days later, at the headquarters of Morgan Construction, the executive floor was silent. "Mr. Morgan, we have an urgent message." The heavy door to the chairman's office flew open. A young employee rushed in, out of breath. "It's an invitation to bid, from Apex Holdings." William Morgan looked up from his papers. For a moment, he doubted his own ears. "Apex? You mean the largest urban development group in the country?" "Yes, sir. It's for the Wall Street redevelopment project. They've specifically invited our company to bid." The employee, unable to hide his excitement, handed over a document. "The estimate is for around $6.5 billion. The moment he heard that number, the world went silent for William. If they won this contract, Morgan Construction would instantly rise to the top of the industry. "Is this a mistake?" William slowly rose from his chair. "A mid-sized company like ours, being chosen by Apex? Sir, this is the opportunity of a lifetime." William stood there, stunned, for a moment. Then, his face lit up with ambition. "All right, tell all employees, from today, all other projects are on hold. This is war. We cannot lose." That night, William rushed home and shouted to his wife, "Elizabeth! Elizabeth, it's finally happened! We got a direct offer from Apex Holdings." "My goodness, you mean the Apex?" "That's right. Our time has come." Elizabeth let out a cry of joy. "If this goes through, we can have Liam's wedding at the most extravagant hotel in the city." William nodded with satisfaction. But then, his expression darkened. Come to think of it, Liam's original fiancée was a nurse's daughter, wasn't she? We were right to cut ties back then. If we were connected to a janitor's daughter, we never would have gotten this chance. Elizabeth agreed, her voice dripping with contempt. Yes, really. It's a waste of time to associate with families who don't know their place. We live in different worlds. Around the same time, on the 65th floor of a skyscraper in New York, Ethan Miller was reporting to Barbara Davis in the chairman's office. Chairman, we have received a formal response from William Morgan of Morgan Construction. They will participate in the bid. Barbara nodded without taking her eyes off the sprawling city lights below. And the background check? Yes, they are a mid-sized company, but their CEO, William Morgan, is extremely ambitious and ruthless. He has crushed many smaller competitors. His wife, Elizabeth, is a homemaker, and their son, Liam, Ethan hesitated for a moment, is Mia Davis's former fiancé. Barbara's eyes narrowed slightly. A long silence filled the room. Finally, she spoke quietly. Let's meet him, in person. A few days later, on the 65th floor of the New York Tower, on the chairman's private floor, William Morgan, dressed in his finest suit, stepped out of the elevator, his face tense. The reception area had floor-to-ceiling glass walls. A massive piece of modern art hung on one wall, and the polished marble floor reflected his image. So this is Apex. The air was different. It was a different class. A secretary guided him to a meeting room. It felt like stepping into a room in a palace. As William took in the luxurious surroundings, the door opened quietly. He reflexively stood up and spoke in a loud, clear voice. A pleasure to meet you. I am William Morgan from Morgan Construction. The moment he looked up, William's eyes widened in disbelief. Standing there was the woman in the worn-out work uniform. On the chest of her faded clothes was the logo. Davis Building Services. A pair of yellow rubber gloves hung from her belt. In her hand was a commercial-grade tote bag. William shouted with contempt. Hey, you! We're in a meeting! Come back later! The woman paid no attention to his words. She walked straight to the chairman's desk and sat down in the large leather chair as if she owned it. William stared, stunned. The woman opened a desk drawer. She took out a fine jacket and put it on. Then, she placed a single business card in front of him. Mr. Morgan, welcome. I am Barbara Davis, chairman of Apex Holdings. William's entire body froze. The blood drained from his face. He couldn't speak. That face, that voice. He could never forget it. The woman he had met at his son's engagement dinner. The woman he had looked down on, insulted. Being told she lived in a different world. The mother of the janitorial staff, Barbara Davis. You seem surprised, Barbara said quietly. Back then, you said we were in different leagues, didn't you? At that moment, the door to the room opened and another man walked in. A man in a perfectly tailored suit, with a calm demeanor. It was Ethan Miller, an executive at Apex Holdings. Mr. Morgan, hello again. I'm Ethan Miller, an executive here at Apex. We've met before, at your company. I was representing Mia Davis. William was completely speechless. What is happening? The janitor's mother is the chairman? Barbara stood up and walked to the window, looking down at the city below. She began to speak. I was widowed in my 20s. To raise my daughter, I started working in building maintenance. But I didn't just clean. I saw the waste, the inefficiencies, the flaws in every building. From there, I started proposing improvements and eventually founded my own management company. I built trust, expanded my investments, and over 30 years, I became the head of Apex Holdings, she continued. But even now, I go to the work sites myself every morning at 4 a.m. I clean with my own hands. That is where I started, and it is who I am, Ethan added quietly. The chairman, no matter how high she rises, never loses sight of the front lines or the people who work there. We believe that is the mark of a true leader. A cold sweat dripped down William's forehead. He could barely stand. Chairman, I am so sorry. I had no idea. Mr. Morgan. Barbara's voice echoed in the room. You judged a person by their status. You used the word class to define a person's worth. I experienced that firsthand, as one of your own staff. Barbara turned to face William directly. Her voice was as cold as ice. This project, we cannot entrust it to your company. William collapsed to his knees on the floor. He begged with a trembling voice. Chairman, please. My employees have done nothing wrong. We will never again speak of differences in status. From now on, with all sincerity, what you have lost is trust. Barbara's words pierced William's heart. You looked at my work uniform, and you looked down on me? That is the answer to everything. Barbara placed her business card on the table again. This project will be entrusted to a company that values people. Mr. Morgan, before you apologize to me, you should apologize to your own son. What you trampled on was a human heart. Barbara quietly left the room. William remained on the floor, unable to move. That night, at the Morgan family's mansion, William returned home with heavy steps. His wife, Elizabeth, ran out from the living room. Her face was shining with anticipation. Darling, how did it go? The contract? I'm sure it went well, right? William didn't answer. He sank deep into the living room sofa. He covered his face with his hands and let out a long sigh. We've done something unforgivable. What? Elizabeth stood frozen, her eyes wide. What do you mean? With a trembling hand, William reached into his jacket pocket. He took out a single business card and placed it on the table. Apex Holdings, Chairman, Barbara Davis. Elizabeth's finger trembled as it hovered over the card. Barbara Davis, that name? It can't be. William nodded, his face a mask of despair. It is. It's her. The woman we looked down on, the woman we said was in a different league. The janitor was the chairman of Apex Holdings. That's impossible. The color drained from Elizabeth's face. It's not impossible. William's voice was a hoarse whisper. For 30 years, she went to work sites at 4 a.m. every single day. She built that massive corporation from scratch while still cleaning floors with her own hands. She was a real leader. Then, Elizabeth was at a loss for words. To a person like that, we were so... William clutched his head. A groan escaped his lips. A $6 billion project is gone, but that's not all. What we've lost was everything, as human beings. Just then, the sound of the front door opening. I'm home. Liam, still in his doctor's coat, had returned from the hospital. The moment he entered the living room, he froze, the deep despair on his parents' faces. The air was heavy as lead. What's wrong? Did something happen? William and Elizabeth looked at each other, and then they told him everything. That Barbara Davis was the chairman of Apex, what they had said that night, what had happened at the meeting today. and that they had lost it all. Liam could only stand there, motionless. Mia's mother. Was a person like that? Did we really judge someone just by their appearance? Elizabeth pressed her hand to her eyes, her voice trembling. We did a terrible, terrible thing. Every time I picture Mia's mother's face, my heart feels like it's going to break. I can't imagine how much we hurt her. Liam stared at his tightly clenched fist. If only I had protected Mia back then. If I had believed in her, no matter what anyone else said, she might still be by my side right now. Suddenly, William stood up as if he had made a decision. Let's go. What? We're going to see them right now, Chairman Davis and Mia. Even if we have to beg for forgiveness, we have to show them we are sincere. If there's even a 1 in a million chance, it's all we can do. At that time, on the top floor of the New York Tower, Mia was bewildered by the sprawling night view below. Mom, why are we here? Barbara, standing by the window, turned around quietly. Next to her stood Ethan Miller, the corporate lawyer. Mia, there's something I should have told you a long time ago. Mia held her breath at her mother's serious expression. What is it? I'm not just a building maintenance worker. The truth is, I am the chairman of Apex Holdings. What? Mia's mind went blank. You remember when you were in elementary school? I used to work all night. But behind the scenes, I was building a company. It started with a small subcontract for cleaning buildings. Little by little, I expanded and built trust. Now, it's a corporation with 25 group companies across the country. Ethan quietly added. The Apex Group's current annual revenue is approximately $80 billion. It started with building maintenance and has expanded to urban development and housing revitalization. But the chairman still goes to the front lines, where it all began, every single morning. Tears streamed down Mia's face. She looked at her mother. Why didn't you tell me before? Barbara gently took her daughter's hands in both of her own. Because I wanted you to find someone who would love you for you, not for status or money. As a woman, not as the chairman's daughter, I wanted you to find someone who would believe in your worth, no matter how you were seen by the world. But I thought it was finally time to tell you, because what you lost was probably something you were better off losing. Early the next morning, William and Elizabeth Morgan paced back and forth in front of the Davis home for 40 minutes. What should they say? How should they start? They couldn't even find the words to apologize, and just stood there. Finally, with a trembling finger, William pressed the doorbell. The door was opened by Barbara. In that instant, the two of them fell to their knees on the pavement. They pressed their foreheads to the ground. Ms. Davis! No! Chairman! We are so deeply sorry. We were so incredibly foolish. Barbara's voice was calm. Please, stand up. Let's talk inside. Once inside the living room, William and Elizabeth remained with their heads bowed low. Mia sat silently next to her mother. It was William who broke the heavy silence. His voice trembled as he forced out the words. Chairman Davis, no, Barbara, we have made an unforgivable mistake. We judged a person's worth by their appearance and profession, and we insulted someone who deserved our utmost respect. Elizabeth added, her voice choked with tears. Mia, I am so truly sorry. I can't imagine how deeply we wounded your heart, and your mother's. We apologize from the bottom of our souls. Mia was quiet, but her voice was firm. I hear your words. But the fact that my heart was broken does not change. This pain will not heal quickly. Barbara began to speak, her expression unchanged. My life has been a series of moments like that. People only judge by what they can see. I've been faced with that reality time and time again. That's why I never told my daughter the truth about who I was. I wanted her to develop the ability to see a person's true character, not their title. William bowed his head even lower. I understand now. More than you can know. A person's worth is not in their status or their wealth. It's in their heart. I see that now, when it is too late. Just then, the living room door opened quietly, and Liam Morgan walked in. He stood with his fists clenched tightly in front of his chest, his eyes fixed on Mia. Mia! His voice was pained. I am so sorry. It was all my fault. I was swayed by my parents' words, and when I heard your mother worked in building maintenance, I created a wall between us. But when I learned your mother was the chairman, I was truly moved by her life story. Mia looked Liam straight in the eye. She spoke quietly. It's ironic, isn't it? Liam started to say something, but Mia cut him off. When my mother was a maintenance worker, you abandoned me. The moment you found out she was a chairman, you want me back? Is that what you call love? Liam's face twisted in pain. No, I truly realize now that I was wrong. Please, just give me one more chance. Mia's answer was calm and unwavering. That day, you rejected my mother, and you rejected me. Your words have no value to me now. Looking at her daughter's determined profile, Barbara smiled faintly. You've become so strong, Mia. A sincere person like that is the one who is right for you. William buried his face in his hands in despair. It's all too late. The seasons changed. A few months later, Mia reconnected with a doctor at her hospital, Oliver Smith, a colleague from her residency. Even after learning everything about Mia's family, his attitude towards her never changed. I was so moved by your mother's story. To start from a hands-on job and build a company that large? That's how I want to live my life. And then, it was their wedding day. In the bridal suite, Mia asked her mother, Mom, why are you wearing your work uniform today? Barbara smiled and adjusted the collar of her uniform. This uniform is what raised me and what raised you. It is my life, so I want to face this day with pride. During the speeches, Barbara stood at the podium and said, With this uniform, I polished floors, I built trust, and I protected my family. A person's value is not determined by their status or their title. It is determined by the heart with which they live each day, and the example they set for the next generation. I believe that love, too, is not measured by conditions, but is shown through actions. A warm and loud applause rose spontaneously from the guests. 1 year later, the happy cries of a baby boy filled Mia and Oliver's home. Barbara held the tiny life in her arms and smiled quietly. True happiness is found in a heart that shares. It's not money or status. It's the strong desire to protect someone you love. That is everything. Mia gently squeezed her mother's hand. Mom, I learned everything from watching you. Thank you. The room was filled with the warmth of a family connected not by appearances, but by sincere hearts.